Good afternoon and welcome. My name is John Sweeney, and this is the third Vladimir Putin Do Fuck Off Festival, along with the UCAN Festival, the two together, and we are doing something wonderful and amazing, which is we are raising money for Ukrainian charities, and we are raising awareness of Russia's brutal fascist war against Ukraine. And I have the most amazing set of talented, interesting, and fascinating people I could get on a wet weekend in Kyiv. So, on the far left, and that's a joke, obviously, is a great American lawyer, Stephen Humphreys, who is currently suing Fox News on behalf of some clients, and we're going to talk about that in this session. Sitting on my left is Vlad Demchenko, who arrested me because he thought I was a Russian spy on day 2 of the big war. He's got an opportunity to apologize. This is the festival director, Maria Cheppa, a Vogue supermodel. Paul Conroy is not a Vogue supermodel. Not yet. Distinguished war reporter. And Arthur Snell, the former High Commissioner to Trinidad and Tobago, and a British diplomat, and a man who's had many interesting careers, including looking after my dog. And arriving late, but never too late, is Lisa Curly Hair and her silly dog.
Our expert number one.
So, Maria's got to run off and organise the festival. But, first of all, the question for a whole panel is the West doing enough to help Ukraine win the war? Maria, you lived under Russian occupation. Tell the audience what you think about that.
Well, I wouldn't like to recall the memories of living under Russian occupation, because it was stressful, and it was
stressful,
to say the least. But as we're moving forward and we are getting closer to our victory, I think that all we have to concentrate on right now is our strength and our will and our power of how to fulfill our wishes to fight Russians and to fight them till the end and to actually win this war. We as a nation were trying to get to the Western audience and Western countries and countries all over the world to support us, and we did receive a great support in the beginning of war, but naturally it fades away with time and people forget, and with new conflicts, new wars, people tend to think about Ukraine less and less. I cannot blame them. I just think that this festival is a great example of how we can draw their attention back and how we can remind people that people in Ukraine are still dying and Russia still invades us and gets more and more of our territory, despite the fact that we occupy a bit of their territory. The first country to occupy a state of nuclear power country. But I think that we shouldn't demand, or maybe we shouldn't demand in despair. We just need to consistently tell people how it is important to not forget about Russia's atrocities and work more on social media propaganda in that direction, because I see a lot of young people forgetting about Russia's evilness and remembering their ballet, their culture, their Tarkovsky, and etc. And it seems to me very funny and dumb to forget about what they're doing to Ukrainian people and make their advantages their culture, which hasn't taught them that you should not destroy another country.
But do you think the West is doing enough?
No, I don't think the West is doing enough. For me, enough would be them gather all their armies and fight Russians off on our territory, fight them off on their markets, financial business markets, fight them, ignore them, isolate them on cultural level, on educational level and all that stuff. But still we have this stereotype that Russian people are they are doomed, but they're still very clever. They are the victims of their regime and all this bullshit. But they chose this regime, and they have been chosen it for centuries. And nothing new is going to arise on that territory from that people. These people will give birth to the same people, and on and on.
That's kind of depressing because it means there's a forever war.
This is the forever war because every generation of Ukrainians fight Russians.
Maybe.
My children may fight Russians. My grandparents were fighting Russians. Their grandparents were fighting Russians. So it's actually each generation. Every.
Well, yeah, but the other thing is that this is the Russian Empire, and empires, they have their great heyday, and then they fall.
And the new one arise.
Well, maybe, but no, the British Empire doesn't exist anymore, and we're not going around
Yeah, but you compare Russians to normal Western people. People who used to live under dictatorship, and people who chose democracy.
I'm reminded that one of my friends called you a spicy meatball. But there's an issue there.
Female friend.
Yes, sure. Now, you've got to go and do some work, haven't you? Because I'm going to ask the soldier here, is the West doing that question? But thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much.
And off to go and run the festival. Splendid, thank you. So, Rademchenko, tell me, is the West doing enough to help Ukraine win the war?
You said her answer was depressive. Man, you need the puppy next to you if you want to hear my. No, for real. If we are talking about this, it will be more question in the end than answers. Because, like, first of all, what is West? Second question, what is enough? And third question, what is win? Like, for real. Like, can you tell me what is West in your opinion? What is the West right now?
Well, it's a kind of abstract idea that takes in the United States, Europe, Britain, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, a chunk of South America. That's how I would see the West. They're defined pretty much because they're all democracies, more or less, and they stand opposed to the tyrants.
What about Hungary, Austria, South Africa right now?
I'm always a bit of an optimist, but I'm very depressed. I think, you know, the Hungarians, they lived through 56 before I was born, but this was a Soviet invasion. And the idea that the Hungarians now side with Russian fascism, having their democracy or their attempt at democracy crushed by Soviet fascism back in 56, I find it astonishing and disgusting. But yes, there are those countries in Eastern Europe in particular, and South Africa, that's very, very depressing. The lessons of apartheid have been forgotten. The idea that they're siding with the Russian fascists is completely wrong and stupid. But there is an idea of the West, and Ukraine is supported, certainly in Britain and the States and in Europe. The polling numbers are strong. But there is a difference between what the politicians are saying and the delivery. So are you on the front line? Are you getting lots of kit, or who's got the material advantage, you or the Russians?
Russians, of course.
Give an example. Explain that.
Okay, you didn't give an answer for my question because, like, it's not clear what is West. Because, man, what is the relationship between United States and Europe right now, especially in the sector of army? There is like a potential president of United States who telling you, hey, Europe, you are by yourself now. So imagine if United States have a reason to refuse you, Great Britain, in help of army support, what we are talking about Ukraine. It's the first what I want to say. Second, again, you tell me about Russia. Everybody, like, for real, like, it's so clear. Russia asked North Korea about artillery shells right here. China just clearly, man, I saw so many boxes with Chinese words. I even published it on my Twitter. It's everywhere. It's so clear for everyone. And even subscribers wrote me it's Chinese symbol, not like North Korean. It's clearly Chinese. And they ask about it, Iran, China, and North Korea. No problem, bro. This is like your artillery shells. This is your armor weapon, whatever you ask. Ballistic rockets, please, you're welcome. So who have more equipment? Ukraine, who is begging for everything, like, for real. We, at one moment in 2023, we was almost short of 556 bullets.
And you've been, can you say where you've been recently?
No.
Okay.
I've been on a vacation with my girlfriend in Spain.
Okay. Good. And, but when you're at the front line, who has the advantage in artillery, and what's the ratio between the Ukrainians and the Russians?
It's not so clear anymore because Russia also don't have so much power as in the beginning of war. So they use like their powers in some special frontline sectors. For example, on Pokrovsk, 100% like went to 20 maybe shells, like one from Ukrainian side, 22 on from Russian side. But again, it depends. It depends. Like when we start operation in Kursk, I believe we have advantage there, like with artillery, because we concentrated there more. But we are talking not only about equipment. It's just general support of ideas that Ukraine need to win. Because I don't believe, like, let's call West, as you say, this like idea that was actual in like Caribbean crisis, because now I don't believe the West is like everything you said. I don't believe that West is like United States, Europe, South Africa, Australia. It's so divided, so it's not a common space of and common ideas and common, not anymore. Even Europe is not a space. Great Britain, you just separate from Europe a long time ago. So it's clear for me, for example. And I don't believe that even those part of West that most supportive to Ukraine, except Great Britain probably, want to Russia to collapse, like I mean as an empire, which is for me only one way to get rid of these scums, because it's only one way for them to exist, to expand. They did it for 400, 500 years. You need to be stupid and not educated person to say like opposite. They make wars, a war. It's only one thing Russia produced. And West clearly wanted to keep Russia as a liberal democratic empire. It's their dream that everybody will live in peace and Russia will control all these nations, like in all these people under control, all this weapon, in some kind of fairy tale democratic way. They really believe they can change Russia. Oh my God. So I don't think the West have any wish for Ukraine to win, because Ukrainian win mean collapse of Russia. What they want to bring balance back. What they think is a balance, where like some Tom or Chris from Kansas wouldn't pay 3 more cents for gas and wouldn't blame them on election when it will come to election. This is their look of the world. They don't look at the Ukraine. They look at the oil prices or the election. Ukraine, for most of politicians in the West, doesn't exist as a, not like a subject, but only like an object of politics. That's all. Ukraine is just an object.
No, it's great that you're questioning the idea of the West, because we have a former British diplomat who can answer that question immediately with all the authority and skill of a former British diplomat. Arthur Snell.
Thank you, John, for dropping me in the deep end there. So I'll start by just veering off slightly to say it's lovely to be here in Kyiv. For those people watching the live stream who might not know, Kyiv is a beautiful city. It's a beautiful European city. It has all the things that you expect to find in beautiful European cities, and it's a pleasure to be here. So having given myself a bit of time, what is the West? Well, I think Vlad has identified a serious point here, which is that actually in the last quarter century, basically since 9/11, the idea of the West has broken apart. It broke apart for various reasons. There's the financial crisis. There was the failure of the West's wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, wars which some of us on this panel had some involvement with. And ultimately, people in the West have become cynical. They don't trust their politicians, and they don't really believe in some of the fundamental values that actually we live to enjoy. But what is sort of cruelly ironic about this is actually that Americans do, of course, live in security, and they live in a democratic country. Their democracy is under strain, and it may not survive the current presidential election, but for the moment it is that. Likewise Britain, likewise Germany and France, and so on.
Do you think Trump's going to win?
Well, actually, I think there's a very high chance of it, yes. And so I appreciate that saying this to an audience in Ukraine is depressing, but we've got to be honest about the fact. So if we look at Donald Trump's record in elections, he always outruns his opinion polling. So in 2016, Hillary Clinton was clearly signaled to win the election, and Trump squeaked over the line. Now, in 2020, of course, he didn't win. I mean, the big lie is that he won. No, he lost. But the polling put Joe Biden about 4 points ahead, and Biden won in the key swing states by, you know, a few thousand votes here and there. Remember Trump begging the Georgia administrators to give him 11,000 votes. So at the moment, the polling puts Trump and Harris on equal votes. If the polling has this traditional problem of undercounting Republican voters, it's easy to understand why, who admits to supporting Donald Trump, then Trump wins it. So that doesn't mean I'm certain he's going to win, but I think that the chances are much higher than perhaps people appreciate. But to try to... Sorry, John, go ahead.
Is the West doing enough to help Ukraine win the war?
No. And so there are two things unfolding here. One is Ukraine is, of course, fighting a battle for survival, and it is a civilizational battle. It's a battle that represents the values that have existed in Western countries and which we've all benefited from. It seems ironic, you know, NATO was established to fight Russia. It never fought Russia in 75 years of existence, and in the end it was left to Ukraine to fight that war. But the other thing that is unfolding here is actually the end of European security, and that is coming from two directions. Obviously it comes from Moscow, but it comes from Washington as well. Once Donald Trump is president for the second time, if it happens, NATO ceases to exist. Now, I don't mean the organization, and I don't believe that the Americans will leave NATO. Sometimes you hear these threats from Trump and his friends. He doesn't need to leave NATO. He's already made it very clear, as Vlad himself drew attention to, that America won't protect its so-called allies under the NATO umbrella. And NATO is actually a belief system as much as anything. NATO works because at the moment, the members of the alliance believe that if they're attacked, the other members will step up for them. So the moment you have somebody who is effectively Putin's puppet sitting in the White House, obviously NATO ceases to function. So the West, of course, is not doing enough to help Ukraine win the war, and that's the number one priority, particularly, obviously, if you're here. But actually, it's not doing enough to think about defending itself once America is no longer trusted as an ally.
Very good.
But how about Great Britain? Because you talk lots about Washington States, and you are former British.
Yes. Thank you. Good question there from the audience.
The actual audience.
The actual audience. Yeah, well, so... Come on, let's stay focused, everyone. So Britain, I know that Britain has done a good job defending Ukraine up to a certain limit. Of course, in the early days when some countries had given up already, some countries had already decided that Kyiv was going to return into the Russian Empire. But the problem that Britain has is that we have not kept our own military spending up. So when we say we want to give Ukraine tanks, which we have, I think we gave you, 20 or something? 14, not even 20. Britain has more horses in its army in 2024 than it has tanks. Now, I know we like history in Britain. We like the Queen and the King and the old-fashioned stuff. But we really should have more tanks than we have horses. But it's the other way around. Britain has not spent enough on its own artillery, on its stocks of long-range missiles. So, yes, Britain will support you. But our military is very much undermined. And if we find ourselves in a situation next year where we are coming to terms with a world where we no longer trust America as a defense partner, then, of course, we have to start focusing on our own defense. Now, I would argue, and I would argue this in Britain, that Britain's defense begins on Ukraine's border with Russia. This is the front line in this country is the front line for all of Western Europe. But unfortunately, a lot of people in Western Europe, including in Britain, they want to do it the other way around. They say, well, we need to build up our own defenses, and then with what's left, we'll give something to Ukraine. And obviously, that's not good enough.
One more question. Yeah?
Please.
The capital of Great Britain, people call Londongrad. But it's a joke. It's ridiculous, right? And many people say that you are wonkers on Russian culture.
Yeah.
Can you...
Yeah, I think that's a very...
By the way, I know what you meant, but you meant wankers. Yeah. You said wonkers, which is slightly different.
We might be both, but...
Is Britain full of wankers about Russian
Yes.
culture, and what are we doing
Yeah.
to burn down London?
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons that Boris Johnson came here to Kyiv right at the beginning and I think is a genuine friend of Ukraine is because he was embarrassed. He was embarrassed personally that he was in a compromised relationship with the KGB dynasty, the Lebedev dynasty, but he's embarrassed nationally for his country because Londongrad was the laundromat for dirty Russian money. The Russians bought properties.
Was or is?
Well, let's start with was, and then we'll talk about is. They bought the properties. The kids of the billionaires went to the fancy private schools, and they attended elite universities, and then they worked as bankers in London. And so, of course, we opened our country to this kleptocratic money. John's question is, but what about now? What about after 22? Well, certainly some sanctions were brought in. Some oligarchs left. A lot of money has moved to places like Dubai, where they don't mind. They don't care where you're from. For example, Abramovich, no longer holds Chelsea. Of course, he should never have had it, but that you could say it's progress. There is still a long way to go. There is still Russians' dark money oil fleet, the shadow fleet that's moving Russian oil around the world, is mostly financed and administered from London. There are oligarchs who are under sanction but have negotiated deals with the British Treasury so they can live the same lifestyle they had before, but just under a kind of license arrangement. So we need to go a lot further. But I think the difference is now it's no longer acceptable. No one would publicly, no self-respecting British person would publicly work for a big Russian oligarch, whereas that used to be something that was a status symbol.
Paul, talking about respectable British people.
That's me.
So, your experience, you've been in Kherson, you've been in all sorts of bad places. What's your sense of the balance between the Russians and the Ukrainians, and is the West doing enough? The West, whatever it is the West doing enough to help Ukraine?
Right. If the question is the West doing enough to help Ukraine win the war, as Vlad said, you have to define win. I think in 1942, or when America when Roosevelt and Churchill got together, they decided that the way World War II would end would be with unconditional surrender. There were no negotiations. The Germans tried at various points to get in touch with the British and hope and cut a deal to surrender to the British and not the Red Army. And they were absolutely not. There is no deals. We want you at the table surrendering. I think, looking at Russia and its plans, that should be the way this ends. It should, ideally be unconditional surrender. The reasons for that are, if you're in Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Poland, Finland, Sweden, you can see what's coming, and they are the people who are most up to date on the Russian threat. As you back off from the Baltic states and Central Europe, the idea of Russian, Ukrainian winning becomes less important because it's not existential for you. By the time you get to America, it's not an existential battle at all. It's about oil prices. It's about the perception of sending men and money. So the definition of winning is critical. It has to be, and I think I agree with the Baltic states, it has to be unconditional surrender. Because if it's a 10-year peace deal, 10 years later, Russia will rearm. They're spending 30% of their economy on weapons at the moment. I think Britain's spending about 2%, promised to go up to 2.5.
Is it 40% I've read somewhere?
Look, it doesn't matter if it's between our 2% in Europe and 40% in Russia. I think the odd point's academic. So, and we all know what Putin does with any kind of deal that he signs. He breaks it. So it has to be Russians out of the temporarily occupied territories and a military victory. Now, if you want a military victory, we have gone exactly the opposite way of achieving a military victory. When I was in the artillery, we used to have lorries full of shells waiting to be fired. We had air cover. Look at Desert Storm. Look at any modern day war that's been fought. The first thing that happens is the Air Force go in for 30 days and take out every air defensive system, every surface-to-air missile system. By the time the guys go in on the ground, there's not much left to fight. The Ukrainians have been asked to do combined assaults without superior air power. That is impossible. You cannot do combined joint force attacks without air cover. So what's happening is they're being given enough so it looks nice. But when I was sitting in Kherson, we're sitting there with 2 shells for a 152 millimeter gun, and everyone then has to wonder, where can we fire that shell? Even when the ammunition's promised in Washington, the pace of getting the ammunition out of the country, in the country, to the front lines, that's how you lose a war. To win a war, you need to know how much ammunition to have. You need to know how much air power you have. You need this in advance. The Ukrainians improvised wonderfully in Kursk, and I think that will be taught for years because they looked at what they had and they said, what can we do with this? But that isn't going to win a war. To win a war, and if they want the war winning, Ukrainians do, Baltic states do, I think Britain does. But the further back you go, the doubt lingers. Do we want chaos in Russia? I do. Yeah, I would like to see chaos in Russia. I would like to see the regime fall and Russia get their act together. Stop picking these strong men that they think they need when they turn themselves into pariahs around the world. But the short answer is, if you want victory, if you want total victory, unconditional surrender, then the West is not doing enough to win this war.
Smashing. So I'm going to call on Stephen Humphreys next. Now, answer the question as briefly as possible, but also tell us in particular about your battle with Fox News. So first of all, Steve, do you think the West is doing enough to help Ukraine secure victory?
Well, when you talk about the West and talk about the United States as part of the West, we're really in a situation where we're now faced with the problem of keeping the United States in the Western alliance. And I don't think that has really dawned on anybody. It's kind of creeping up in the subconscious minds of I think even the Trump supporters would be shocked to hear that that's the consequence of what they're doing and what their support is. But the mental ground is being prepared for that. And the bloodthirsty dictator, Vladimir Putin, could not have devised a better scheme to divide the American people and divide the American consciousness than the Australian Rupert Murdoch. When I first started coming to Ukraine after the full-scale invasion, everybody I talked to in America would clap me on the back and say, and congratulate me and tell me how wonderful they thought it was that I was, coming here to try to help Ukraine and how much they supported Ukraine. And then a year later, it's total division and starts with, small things like, why are we sending so much money over there? We just had a hurricane in the United States, so now it's the meme has come back. Why are we sending any money to Ukraine? We shouldn't send any money to Ukraine while we have a hurricane here. We need to repair. And it starts with, why are we sending the money? And then it's subtly creeped up to, oh, Putin's not so bad. Putin won an election. You read John Sweeney's book about how he wins elections by murdering his opponents, and that's just lost on the Trump supporters. And the reason is they have a 24-hour-a-day barrage of lies from Fox News. It's interesting that they booted Tucker Carlson out of there. He was the... I agree. He was the first one to say what was, at the time, a shocking thing, like, why shouldn't we support Russia? I mean, he came out and said it very openly. So like I said, the mental ground is being prepared. And, there have been... So I'm attacking Fox as a lawyer, and there have been what you would think very successful attacks on them for their lies. They just had to pay $787 million to Dominion Software Company to settle.
What's the specific thing that you're suing? You're suing on behalf of two people, I think.
Yeah, so I'm suing, I put it in the context of Fox is a lie machine. They lie to their viewers. They lie to each other. They lie to, in this case, I represent the parents of Sasha Kuvshanova, a 24-year-old Ukrainian woman who Fox hired as a fixer, took her out near Irpin on a day that every sign was, don't go there. Their own, when you think of it as a lawyer and think of a liability perspective, Fox's own security advisors told them not to go, and they went anyway. You think of that in terms of just legal liability. That's incredible.
There's a book that's been written about this. It's called Saved, and it's by Benjamin Hall, and it doesn't tell that story.
No, well, that's what I'm saying. Rupert Murdoch has constructed a culture of lies. It's a 24-hour-a-day barrage of brainwashing lies. They don't know how to tell the truth about anything. So in the book Saved, Ben Hall concocts the fiction that, when we went out there near Irpin that day, we thought the Russians were 30 miles away, which, of course, we'll ask.
I've been there in the same day when she was killed in Irpin.
How far away were the Russians?
Inside the city. It was like battle across the street. They was actually near the bridge that like the river that crossing Kyiv from Irpin. It was the same day.
So the Russians weren't 30 miles away?
From city... No, they've been like 30 kilometers from the city center of Kyiv.
But they weren't 30 miles away from Irpin.
They was inside in Irpin.
They were in Irpin.
Of course.
Now, Fox, by the way, you're suing Fox on behalf of Sasha's mum and dad, Stephen, and Fox have said what?
Well, they have a number of things, but without going into a whole law school education, the central battle right now is about whether Ben Hall had anything to do with getting Sasha and Pierre Zashevsky killed out there. And they're trying to say, this is kind of their legal logic. You know, Ben Hall was injured also. How could he had anything to do with getting Pierre and Sasha killed?
What do you believe the truth is?
Well, the truth...
You're saying that's not true. Ben Hall had nothing to do with their deaths. There was nothing he did that led to their deaths.
Well...
What do you think the truth is?
No, well, it's not what I think. It's what's documented that Ben Hall had everything to do with taking the crew out there. Really, the only question is whether how much Fox in New York knew about what he was doing. But to make a very long story short, they had Fox was pushing to go out to Irpin because other news organizations had had some, very iconic stories out of Irpin. Fox was too late. By the time they were pushing to go out there, everyone in the military, the Ukrainian government, their own security advisors telling them not to go. The driver who was supposed to take them that morning refused to go. He's like, I'm not going out there.
So, by the way, to be fair, it's important that what I will do is put up at some point on my Twitter feed, I'll try and do this today, Fox's reply to your law.
So legally, they're saying the case should be dismissed because Ben Hall had nothing to do with the crew getting killed that day. The truth is that they were pushing to go out to Irpin. Their own security advisors told them not to go. So they actually, the day they were killed, they had a plan to go. They wanted to film the defenses of Kyiv inside the Kyiv city limits. Of course, that's a very bad idea. Vlad, what would you think about having a news crew come film the defenses of Kyiv?
I went there, so
Yeah.
I can't blame myself that I'm stupid. But no, it wasn't a good idea.
It wasn't a good idea, and the Ukrainian military turned him away at gunpoint, so they like, we have to have something else to do, so they decide, we'll just take a little unscripted trip out to Horinka. Well, professional news crews don't ad-lib that kind of a thing. So,
But the point about Horinka is it's not very far from Irpin.
Well, here's the point. That day they had a plan to go film inside the Kyiv city limits. Ben Hall made the decision. What we don't know is if he talked on the satellite phone to Fox in New York about it, but Ben Hall, certainly part of the decision to go. They were told by their own security people, do not go an inch past this checkpoint. They made a lot of mistakes, including leaving their security behind that day, but they ended up being killed several kilometers past the point where their own security advisor said, don't go an inch past this point. Ben Hall made the decision, either on his own or talking to Fox in New York, to go way outside the Kyiv city limits. They're actually there's a place where the city limits of Irpin, Bucha, and Hostomel all come together. That's where they were killed. And they were killed the day after Brent Renault, another journalist, was killed in the same area. They had, and everybody warning them not to go, and they had the actual warning of a journalist being killed there, and they went anyway.
And the mayor of Irpin said no journalist should go to Irpin. How far is Horenka from Irpin, Vlad?
It's a kind of part of the city. You can say there is no separate borders, but Horenka is closer to Bucha than to Kyiv, to be honest, because you need to go outside from Kyiv. There is Irpin, there is Horenka, and there is Hostomel, so it's
So they're all in the same...
No, they was behind the lines. There was no straight line, front line those days, but they was straight somewhere in the middle of the fight, just
So they went to a place where...
Where definitely was Russian army, 100%. at the moment, like 100%.
And then a year later, Ben Hall writes a book, talking about the culture of lies. He writes a book saying, we thought the Russians were 30 miles away.
So, by the way, Ben Hall is perfectly pleased. If we're wrong about this, and you can prove that the Russians were 30 miles away from Irpin and Harenka, please get in touch and we'll look at that.
Yeah, and let me say one thing. So now, of course, we responded that way, and so Fox has said, well, you're suing Ben Hall for making a mistake. And so to be very clear, we're saying Ben Hall did not believe that the Russians were 30 miles away at the time that he went out there. There's no way he could have believed that.
He knew the truth that the Russians were in Irpin, and he pretended to his audience that they weren't.
Look, one thing that happened to him on the way to Horenka, he definitely saw 1,000 cars trying to flee out from Horenka, like thousands and thousands, and not even one car going to this direction. It's what I saw when I was going to Irpin. Definitely 100%, like at least he can stop somebody if he was worrying about his own security, not like about Sasha, and can ask what's happening there. Thousands of cars was fleeing out from there, just like.
Is this on March 14th? So they had been fleeing before, but on March 14th?
No, man.
Even on that
you
day?
don't even understand the scale of this. When we came there with Kim, like that was crazy amount. There was not even like.
No, but that's earlier. That you were with Kim Sam-Gupta.
No, it was like.
It was
Same days. No. When I've been with Chris Ciccone, who will come next. When we have this news, we was in Irpin when somebody told that there is journalist was killed from Fox News. I remember I've been in Irpin that day.
Okay.
So,
anyway, this is something that everybody in the American media should follow up and have a look at, because Fox News is being sued by Stephen Humphries, and although he's in contention with them, but he represents a Ukrainian mum and dad whose daughter was killed, and the Fox reporter who told the story has claimed something which is obviously untrue, and there's a problem that Fox needs to address. We'd look forward to their replies.
And based on that falsehood, they're trying to have the case dismissed. So that.
Yes, well, we shall see how that pans out. This is all part of the information war, which is part of our great difficulties. Now, Lisa curly hair, as you're on my back. Always forget your surname because.
Kozlenko. It doesn't really matter. Like curly hair more.
Lisa Kozlenko, and of course, Peanut, the savage beast.
Peanut Kozlenko.
So, is the West doing enough to help Ukraine secure victory?
Well, of course, the answer is no, and I would agree with Vlad Demchenko in 100%, but I want to talk about something that nobody has said so far. You know, I'm Ukrainian, I'm local. I've always been here for the Battle of Kyiv and all other attacks. Always fucking here, living in my home and trying to do what I can for the victory and for my home country, because I got no other home to live in. I'm very radical. I'm very cruel when it comes to Russian inhumans. So I would say I'll never ever forgive the West, collective West, for this decision to boil Russia as a frog and to do it slowly. You know, like, thanks to Ukrainian armed forces, the electricity is still on, the water is still on, the internet is still on, and there are no Russian tanks in our streets. But we keep dying every day. The best of Ukrainian sons and Ukrainian daughters, they keep dying. And not only Ukrainian sons and daughters. Recently, a great friend of mine was wounded, a British guy. He came here to fight for Ukrainian freedom. And in the very beginning, we were together at Territorial Defense Forces. He was the first foreigner I met, and I helped with war and everything. And he said, Lisa, you know what? Nobody messes up with Europe. I'm here, I might not understand this war the way you do, but why I came here, nobody messes up with it. And he's still fighting. It's 2024, and he got wounded. And he's at the hospital right now. And I thought nobody will make me cry, but this thing did. And because we are friends and we are close, and just the thought of him possibly dying, I cannot bear it. Like many other Ukrainians cannot bear the thoughts of their sons, daughters, fathers, mothers, sisters dying. And we don't want all of it to be in vain. And I'll never forgive the West that another decision, not allowing us to strike deep into Russian territory, not allowing us to defend our territory properly, the way we see it, the way our military management sees it. I'll never forgive them of being scared of Putin and of Russia and this fucking term red lines. You know, it has become so funny, sad in Ukraine. We joke about red lines with tears in our eyes. Like, we invaded Russia for the first time since the Second World War. We invaded Russian territory. We crossed all the red lines possible. And nothing happened. There was no escalation, I mean nuclear escalation. They didn't nuke anyone, so they bluff all the time. And then, yet still the West says, no, you are not allowed to strike, because what if we cross some other red lines? And I'm going to be very cruel right now. What I'm going to say, recently, like, I have many friends at the front line fighting. Some of them are drone operators. They sent me sweet videos. You know, there is one thing that would calm me down before sleep, is the video of Russian soldier either dead or being blown up with a lot of blood. It's like, it's the sweetest lullaby for me as a local and as someone who was always in this war. And one of my friends sent this, and look, I'm going to show you what the real red lines are. And there is the Russian soldier hiding in some trench. And there is our drone, FPV, dropping something on him. And there's the explosion. And boom, his leg was split in half. And he starts bleeding, like massive bleeding. And he starts crawling somewhere. And he was literally drawing red lines with his leg. And he's like, this is the only red lines I can see. So what we're talking about? Okay. Very dark humor. Okay.
Yes.
This is the first war that I've covered where the aggressor gets to draw the red lines. It shouldn't be happening. The Russian Empire are drawing red lines, and then when them red lines are crossed, they're playing the victim, which is the supreme irony of Russia drawing red lines in the sand. And when they're crossed, and this is all part of the information campaign. This is the way they've got it. And bizarrely, the world is sitting by going, oh, we better not cross their red lines. They are the aggressors. The red lines should be around Russia, and they shouldn't be crossing them red lines, there's nothing there that says that wars must be fought in the country that has been invaded. That never happened before. Bomber Command in World War II certainly didn't stick to that red line when they flattened Dresden and Berlin. So these red lines are a Russian invention, and they've successfully been put out into the information world. And all of a sudden the rest of the world going, well, we mustn't cross the red lines, under the guise of de-escalation and Jake Sullivan. And it's a complete nonsense that the aggressor is drawing the lines.
Okay, so I'm worried about the red line of time, so we need to wrap it up this session in a couple of minutes. And I was going to ask the following question of all of our speakers. So it is, if there's one thing the West, the collective West, if it exists, should do, what is it? And Paul, you've already spoken. Arthur, one thing the West should do to help Ukraine secure victory.
Yeah, so if just one thing, I think it has to be an end to any kind of restriction of weapons that are supplied to Ukraine. That's just a start. That doesn't win Ukraine the war, but it's a start. And that, because it's so ridiculous that this debate has rumbled on, as Paul has just talked about, the idea that the aggressor gets to define the way that a country defends its sovereign territory is an insanity, and it is one that ends with Ukrainian defeat, which we can't accept. So there have to be no restrictions.
I hope my contribution isn't controversial, I would give Ukraine a nuclear weapon. Yours.
I think collective West need to realize that they are in a big trouble, and Ukraine is only one chance for them to pay less price by themselves. I mean, in human lives. It can sound awful, but Ukraine can be used by instrument from West to save their own assets from very huge trouble, because the world where they used to live doesn't exist anymore, and they don't realize it. It doesn't exist. It wouldn't, like, I mean, it wouldn't happen. It's already happened, and they still live in the past. And this is what common for them and Russia. Russia live in the past, and West live in the past. So one thing they need to do to help Ukraine, they need to realize, first of all, that they are in huge trouble.
Very good. Stephen and Lisa.
All right, I got 3 real short answers. 1, elect Kamala Harris. 2, prosecute Donald Trump for his crimes and put him in prison for the rest of his life. And 3, sue Fox News out of existence.
Amen. Amen, Steve. I do agree completely.
Fox News are welcome to turn up to the festival and reply. And Peanut will behave. Lisa,
What the West is supposed to do, I would say, I'm very radical. I would say NATO should step in finally, send its soldiers, and if NATO steps in, this war will be over very, very quickly. Because the West, people in the West are scared of what will happen to the world if Russia collapses. But they never ask themselves the question, what will happen to the world if Russia remains the way it is? And what will happen to Europe and to the whole continent? So we're waiting, guys, while it's still not too late. The best sons and daughters of Ukraine already died. Honestly, what's left, like me, I'm not the best, and this is a shame. So please, at least save some of us, because we are great people, and you see that we can defend, we can do anything, we can do the impossible. So we're still waiting for you while it's not too late.
good, lovely. So, everybody, I think everybody speaking should give themselves a round of applause, and everybody listening out there and here should give our wonderful guests a round of applause. Woo, 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 woo. It was W. Fields, one of his name, he said never worked with children and animals. Obviously, Peanut's an exception. So we're back in at 3:05 for our second session today. Talking. Remember, if you can send money to the crowdfunder, that would be lovely. It's for a basket of 7 Ukrainian charities. And this is, and let's all say it, a simple message to Vladimir Putin. It goes like this: Vladimir Putin, do fuck off. Good. Okay. We have a break for...
Right in time.
Dirty wars around the rest of the world, including its disinformation war in the West, in Britain, and the States, in Europe. How do we stop Russia, stopping Russia? So on the left is Dima Kovalchuk, who is the greatest fixer, driver, and if you think I'm a drinker, wait till you meet his father. How do we stop Russia?
It's a difficult question, but what my way is to stop Russians, it's to work with foreign media outlets, to bring them to the front line, to show them what war is with their own eyes, not just me here in Kyiv sitting with them at the restaurant and like giving like our narratives, but to allow them to see this Russian terror in action. And also I'm part of a charity foundation, and we bring military aid to the front line, to soldiers, and we're always happy to bring any journalist, any NGO worker, or any volunteer who's willing to come to Kyiv. And also like we want them to come more closer and to talk with soldiers more directly, to them understand what's going on there. So that's my way.
Good on you. So by the way, we've got a couple of new faces in the panel. Paul Nyland on the right. Paul runs Lifeline Ukraine, which is a brilliant charity, which is a kind of Ukrainian version of the Samaritans. But Paul, tell us something all about that. It's one of the charities that this whole festival is aimed at giving money to. Tell us something about that, Lifeline Ukraine, and also, how do we stop Russia?
Thank you, John, for the kind introduction. Yes, so I'm the founder of the National Suicide Prevention Hotline here in Ukraine, Lifeline Ukraine. And I'm grateful to you for your past support, John, as well as ongoing support for this organization. Echo flows, yes, they were very essential when the power started getting knocked out. In a couple of words, very soon is the 5th anniversary of Lifeline Ukraine becoming operational. The 14th of October, in actual fact, will be the date that we have been operating for exactly 5 years. The war has affected us in many ways, primarily in the demand for support, psychological support, in times of emotional crisis. And before the full-scale war, we went from an average of 1,000 instances of support that we provided every month now to a demand of about 6,500 instances of support every single month from people across Ukraine. We're only through limitations, and everybody's budget is finite, we're only able to currently handle around 67%, 3/4 of those demands, about 4,000 calls per month. How do we stop Russia? Well, that is an excellent question. With things that go boom, with bombs and missiles, and the permission to use them absolutely anywhere where there is a gathering of Russian troops that threatens this country, whether it threatens to cross the border from Russia or whether it threatens to launch planes that drop bombs on civilians. The way to stop Russia is things that explode on Russian military assets and the permission to use them without limitation.
Good. So let's go and ask the diplomat, or the former diplomat. Weasel, come on. So that's, to be realistic, a lot of the West now is talking in weasel words or hinting at an accommodation, some kind of deal, land for peace. The Italian Prime Minister Meloni, who's actually been, despite a horrible domestic politics, has been good on Ukraine, but she was pranked by Russian comedians, and she was saying everybody's getting a bit bored with it, a bit tired with it. So what are we doing? So is the West talking with a forked tongue about Russia, or is this, we have to be realistic, is this really what Western policy is? Arthur, that's not a difficult question.
Not difficult at all, no. Well, I think let's start with one point, which is that as we were covering in the previous session, the West is divided, and it's also facing its own sort of crisis of self-confidence and self-identity. So it is very easy to get people to start speculating about whether or not, yes, you would cut a deal with Russia. I genuinely, I'm not just saying this to try and defend, I'm not employed by any government anymore. The Western countries are not keen for Russia to succeed, but they're just not keen enough to actually make the difference. And I think that's a sort of this weird situation we're in. It's a contradictory situation. I think the other thing, and this is something that I see, I talk to a lot of people still working inside government. There's a lot of delusion. The number of times I've been told since February 2022, oh, the Russian economy is about to collapse. Well, I haven't noticed it's collapsing. The fact that they're spending 40% of their GDP on defense, it hasn't killed the Russian economy. If you look at the number of cars now being exported to places like Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, because they're finding their way obviously back to Russia, the Russian economy is doing fine. Russia.
Are these Nissan Micras and Fiat?
And I don't think they're cheap, affordable family cars. I think they're more the armor-plated Mercedes type of cars.
And Rolls-Royces.
And no doubt Rolls-Royces, yes. And the kind of cynicism of these companies saying, well, it's our team in Bishkek is really doing a great job these days. It's we've got to be a bit more realistic about that, and we have to destroy Russia's economy, and we're not doing enough to ensure that happens.
Lovely, Kaylin, you can join us as well, by the way, if you because of the peanut. Sorry, Kaylin, if you want to be a speaker, pull up a chair and speak, as it were. Good. So also joining us is Ludmila Bumista, the MP for the Golden Gate, and all the bars they're in, probably the MP for the Buena Vista. Is that right? Yeah. Indeed, definitely, because it was the only bar in town that was open. So the topic of this conversation is stopping Russia. How do we stop Russia, Ludmila?
Hello, everyone, and sorry for being late, but John, you always find the most extraordinary venues that are the most difficult to find, which is great. Great hiding strategy. Exactly. Great operational security. I've heard a little bit of the conversation before, and I have to say it's encouraging to see that we all understand the problem in more or less the same way. And the biggest challenge that we are facing, as far as I can see it, is that we don't have a clear answer. Like, we don't want Russia to win, but we don't understand what Ukraine winning actually means. And we see very objective reports from the military on the front line, and that there is no silver bullet that can help us completely beat Russia and its economic and military potential, especially because the more efforts we put into the warfare, the more Russian access of partners also unites and crosses various red lines, like the Iranian missiles supplies to Russia. So, and North Korea, obviously. So I think the most challenging thing for all of us is to understand what victory actually means, and what will we define collectively as victory for as long as it takes to fight for it. And I think fundamentally we have all now lost that ground that we used to have, that belief in the international policy, in the international collective security that was crafted after the Second World War and survived the Cold War, so actually proved its efficiency in a way, leading to the collapse of Soviet Union. But now we see the same system not being able to address the military challenges, the challenges that are outside of hybrid threats. And here, I think we're looking into a situation where we all have to define for ourselves what Russia going forward means for us as a state that we all can tolerate in a democratic Western society. Because what we cannot tolerate is bombing civilian infrastructure. What we cannot tolerate is invading a state with no rhyme or reason, just for geopolitical ambition and fight for own internal struggles for power. And I think we all have to admit that there are nations that do not respect international rules and order and that want to challenge the rules that we have so carefully created and protected. And those countries and those regimes only understand the language of force. They don't understand negotiation, guarantees, or any piece of paper. Even the fundamental non-proliferation policies that we were thinking would save us from mutually assured destruction. We now see even those being challenged by these nations. And I think fundamentally we will see in a due course the reform of United Nations and security mechanisms. But for it to be independent from Russian influence inside those institutions, like in the UN Security Council, we actually have to weaken Russia and force them to respect international law and rules and order. Because they will only, those aggressive nations will only understand the language of force. So we need to show them by force on the battlefield that they cannot impose their order. And that means progressing on the front line for Ukraine. Not regressing, as we see now, but actually putting all our efforts, and I know we have them. Probably we don't have collective efforts or collective capabilities for now, at least, to completely destroy Russian army. But what we do have is enough capability to jointly start progressing on the front line. And this is actually the only thing we need to give hope to everybody in the world who still believes that we can live in a free, democratic world without the global threats that we are currently facing. The belief to fight, to continue the fight. It will explain to your nations back home and to the entire world that we actually can achieve positive results. And I think if anything Kursk operation did is give hope also to the Russians who are fighting for their independence and for their rights in their own country, that it is actually possible to have a piece of land that Russia so protects freed from their control and influence. And I think we also should support those Russians and those nations as much as we can right now collectively, so that they achieve those results when they that they are actually dreaming of. And that eventually will lead to weakening of authoritarian regime. And that is the only thing that will actually put Russia around the negotiation table for real, not on their conditions. So I think, if anything, that recipe of internal destabilization of Russia can be the recipe of Ukrainian victory, if you want.
Lovely. Thank you very, very much, Lyudmila Burmistr. By the way, this is all if you're following this on YouTube, please donate to our crowdfunder. All money from that goes directly to a basket of 7 Ukrainian charities, including Paul's Lifeline Ukraine. So, Kaylin Robertson, I think when you were first thinking about coming to Ukraine, you were pretty skeptical. You've got a frankly terrible history. But there is more joy in heaven for the sinner that repenteth. And you've been to Kherson, fair play to you. Tell everybody what it's like to be in Kherson now, what it feels like. And then, if you can, Kaylin, reflect a little bit perhaps on how you think we should stop Russia.
So last week I heard that the drone attacks that are going on in Kherson were increasing in frequency, becoming more and more outrageous. The Russians just south of the river in that city have started about 3 months ago. They declared the entire north part of the river as a red zone, which means that civilians are all fair game, and they've started crashing drones and FPVs into everybody walking the streets there. Some days it's up to 300 incidences a day. So I wanted to go and find out what's going on specifically, and what that looks like for the people that are left there. I'd been to Kherson last year with John to make a documentary together, and the threat back then was from artillery. And you almost felt slightly safer, being between two walls or being at the north side of all the buildings there that don't overlook the river. Soon as I arrived in Kherson, I realized that fundamentally everything had changed, that it was a different city, a different ballgame entirely, because the type of warfare the Russians are now using there is unprecedented in a civilian area. The drones target people, can see everywhere. They can see where you are at all times. They've been, it's some of the volunteers that I met there that had operated and opened up their offices in the north side of one building said, we thought this was safe, and now it isn't, and now there's nowhere to go except for to leave. We saw videos that they showed me of drones that were coming in and basically blowing holes in people's windows or in solar panel roofs, and then sending another drone in after, which means you could be between two walls, you could be in a basement, and it doesn't make a difference. You can be targeted specifically, and this is an unprecedented type of warfare that's being waged against a city, and all the rules are out the window. So what I saw was a city that, Kherson is amazing. It was so vibrant, it still is, of 370,000 people. We saw it erode and degrade to a certain point. There was probably around 100,000 when John or I was there last year, but you could still see life and people in the streets. Now, what I saw was a city almost emptied, and that might be because people just don't leave the house anymore, except for to get essentials once a week, or it might be because people have left, and it is becoming a ghost town. It's eerie in a way I've never seen before. And what the Russians have started to do there is probably the beginning of the type of warfare they will launch across the rest of the world, other countries that they're going to go to war with. It's like they're using Kherson as a testing ground of civilians. So it was haunting, horrible. The feeling that a drone can physically look at you, because at one point in the documentary I made there, one was hovering right above me, and I was running between each tree as cover, because it's in that city, it's not two walls that protects you, it's literally Mother Nature. It's people going out when it's windy because the drones can't fly, or they're hiding under trees, which is totally unusual. It was a feeling of being observed in a way that was utterly terrifying. But what's happening now is the leaves are falling from those trees, and that's going to mean there will be no protection in that city. The only thing that's keeping people together and sane in the market in the morning is everyone walking through the tree lines, under the tree lines. I remember being shouted at immediately when I got there because I'd walked into the middle of the market and took a filming shot, and everyone was saying to get away, because if you could see the sky, then they can see you. So I don't know what's going to happen. No one knows what's going to happen when the leaves fall from the trees in Kherson. Those are the only places you can park your car and sell apples and walk down the streets. So it's going to be a deeply concerning winter. And I was only in that city for 3 days, and already had witnessed a drone crash into a car, had a drone come over me twice, and just complete devastation everywhere. So I have no idea how it would feel for the people there longer. I was just glad that I had the opportunity. I could leave. Yeah, I'm making a documentary. And when is it being it's being premiered here tomorrow. I just yeah, but it's pretty nuts. And the film goes into also. I have a UK number, and I have a military intelligence advisor who basically said maybe one of the reasons you were targeted, if not very likely, is the Russians have built a line of network and 4G towers across the south of the river, and they can and the phones of the people in Kherson can a lot of the time automatically connect to those servers and those network towers, and the Russians can start seeing almost who is who in the city, who the volunteers are, who the foreign phone numbers are. They can download your information, and they can also make a drone hit an IP address. They can actually put that information in. So the Russians have built 2,000 new network towers in the Kherson and Zaporizhia region in the last year, and a lot of them are south of the river. Not a lot, but a lot.
The methodology is that if the signal pops up on two towers, they can work out exactly where you are.
Yeah.
Yes. Wait a sec. I want you to talk next because you've also spent a lot of time in Kherson, more than Kyiv. What's your recipe for stopping Russia?
The only way Russia could be stopped is if the West realizes that it is an enemy to the entirety of the West and not just people in Ukraine. Realize that they've been at war with all of us if you live anywhere in the West for decades. They've eroded our democracy, interfered and pumped filth into our network ways. We saw this with Tenet Media, shot down planes over Ukraine, and poisoned people on the British Isles. So if we actually realize that they are already at war with us, then we might actually start supporting and defending Ukraine, and that's kind of the only way that Russia can only be defeated in the fields, on the battlefields. They can't be defeated through conversations. They can't be defeated through diplomacy. They can only be defeated through might and force. And if the West actually realizes that and allows Ukraine to defeat what is all of our enemies by tripling, quadrupling the amount they're spending and the stuff they're sending and the permissions that are allowed here, then that's how Russia could be defeated. And Russia is going to be much easier to defeat on the front lines here than it is in towns and cities across Europe, which will happen one day, and then it becomes even closer. So at that moment, when we realize they're actually a threat to all of us.
Good. Thank you. So Paul, is kind of making it up about Kherson?
No, absolutely not. Kherson, if you remember, was occupied. It was the first city occupied. It was the first oblast occupied, and it was also one of the first liberated. And when that liberation happened, for a week in Kherson, there was a real joy about the fact that, hey, we're liberated. When in fact, what the Russians did is went 900 yards over the river, set up the heavy weapons, and since that day, Kherson has been shelled on a daily basis. I lived there for, I think it was 8 months. We lost, on the first day, the first place we had the conversation was blown up the next morning, and that was because a collaborator had given information that we were there. The second day, we were sat in the house, and a Grad rocket landed in the garden and blew the back of the house in. So we moved again.
This sounds like Liverpool.
It's worse. No, I wouldn't go that far. And then our third apartment was all the back windows, the whole kitchen, the balcony were blown in with a Grad strike. As 8 months ago in winter, I was chased by a drone, so it's not new. It's just, I think the program has been expanded. It's kind of possibly a bit of a misleader because the Russians in Kherson know that they have no way of coming back to take Kherson because the Antonivsky Bridge and the Novokhovka Dam is blown. So you have this situation where they're on that side, the Ukrainian military on that side, and they daily shell and bomb and drone each other. But they know there is no way that there is going to be a land war again because they're separated by the Dnipro River. Consequently, the Russians are now terrorizing the civilian population, but this has been going on since the day of liberation. It's not a new thing. And I'm slightly dubious that it's a new form of warfare that will be employed because it's being used on the front lines. You know, I used to drive in and out of Kramatorsk and Bakhmut and Sloviansk and Kupiansk, and there were always drones, and them drones are used to take out vehicles or to guide in artillery strikes. What's the situation in Kherson is it's the only way they can do anything. There will never be another battle, land battle about Kherson because of the river. So they have developed a form of warfare that is horrifying to civilians. But I think as a, you know, drone warfare in general has grown up. It's come of age in the Ukraine war, and it's something that we're going to see a lot more of worldwide. It's not just the Russians. It's the new arms race, drone warfare.
In a pithy sentence or two, how would you stop Russia?
I agree with Paul that with really big things that go bang. I think in order to be able to do that, though, as press, it's our job is to never allow people to turn around and say we didn't know, and to keep public opinion, to get public opinion to a point where they agree and pressurize their own governments that we need to give them things that go bang, that can go bang in Russia. We need to keep the public aware. So it's with people like Dima who take us out, who take the foreign press to the front lines that make that possible. And we have to combat war weariness, which annoys me because I think war weariness is most definitely the domain of people in trenches, not people in capital cities around the world. And we have to combat editors who think that the war's not as much fun anymore now that Israel and Iran are fighting each other. We had the Hamas thing. All of this takes away the spotlight, and when the spotlight goes, public opinion starts to waver. And as journalists, we just have to keep showing the reality of war. It's not just in the trenches, it's in the cities, it's in Kherson, it's displaced families, it's broken families. That is the true effect of war, and we have to keep that in the public eye if we want to be able to pressure our politicians into giving Ukraine as what is needed. So I think that's from my perspective and my job, how we help Ukraine when we keep it in the public eye, and it's a long and often disheartening fight to keep these stories in the public eye.
Can I just add one thing about... So if I put on my other hat, and I thank you for agreeing with me, of course. If I put on my other hat, I'm a journalist as well. And the day that Paul describes and how everything changed and the people of the city of Kherson became a target as the Russian forces were expelled from that city, go back 40 days prior to that. 40 days prior to that, Vladimir Putin stood in the Kremlin and he said, those people are Russian, this territory is Russian forever. And then in an instant, those people he'd just declared 40 days prior to be Russians, he now starts bombing them. Like, that's what happened. That's what happened. And I used that, actually, mention my journalism. I use that as an example because I wrote this article for Byline Times maybe about 9 months ago or something like that, was people were talking about Crimea and saying Ukraine wants to liberate even Crimea. Like this was a big question. And I used the Kherson annexation speech that Putin delivered in the Kremlin as an example that he did exactly the same thing with Crimea. It was a carbon copy, the same room, the same speech, the same bullshit. We've had a referendum, those people have spoken, etc., etc. It was exactly the same. And when Kherson was liberated, Putin did nothing. And that's why his red lines over Crimea also don't matter as well. The precedent is there.
Lovely. Sorry, Dima, then I want to ask Vlad. But Dima, you had a point.
Yeah, just a few statements. Just to confirm, Kaylin and Paul's statements about the FPV drones, yeah, first-person view, kamikaze drones are a big problem for Ukrainian soldiers, for civilians, for NGO workers. And as you see now, all fundraising and all requests from soldiers are they asking for drone jammers to protect themselves. So it proves that it's a big problem now, these FPV drones.
I've got a drone jammer inside my hat. So Vlad, can you talk about drones a bit? You're a soldier. You may have come across one or two. And how do we stop Russia? But first of all, your experience, your personal experience with drones, etc.
First of all, I want to say that drone warfare is not Russian thing. Actually, Ukrainians start doing drone warfare even before the full-scale invasion. So and FPV drones, particularly, is Ukrainian invasion to use these small FPV drones. I know people who was pioneers of these things, and actually, this is how Ukraine changed the world warfare. Like, it's historically known fact. War changed forever. And a couple days ago, I met a new friend from Poland, and we was talking about war, and I started telling him about FPV, and he asked me, "What is FPV?" Yeah, exactly. Was my reaction. And I realized he don't know. Like, he saw these videos, but he didn't realize how it works. And when I explained him how it actually works, that there is a person, like that it's actually flying artillery shell, that is your personal shell, and it will following you 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers. Now you can fly up to 25 kilometers. It starts from 900 meters, when I remember when it started. And so it's a Ukrainian thing. We was chasing Russians. For Russia, it was actually a big surprise. And except a Western weapon, drones was a big part of Ukrainian success, first week of the war. And about my experience, I will tell you that last year I went straight from the trenches to some military studies, somewhere like in a secret place. And there was around 200 people, and part of these people came from a front line. And we was standing there just waiting for our lessons to start. And somebody have a lesson with drones, just flying above our heads. And you clearly see those people who came from a front line, just like 20 people was like... We was in a safe place. It was clearly a safe place, but your brain doesn't work like that. You just fall on the... and I can explain you how it works. You hear the sound of drones every fucking second in the sky when you're on the front line in the trenches. And you never know, is it your or is it like enemy? And the most conversation on the radio you hear is like, whose drone that? We will shoot it like immediately. And a lot of drones are shooted like by friendly fire because you can't hold this fucking pressure. You don't know. Even like, first thing you see, which type, like, is it Mavic? Does it have grenades under him? Now, not so many people using these drops, still using, but FPV drones, it's absolutely nightmare. Ukrainian-Russia war, it's the most scariest war for whole history. Even scary. I was doubted about this idea in the beginning when people was telling me that it's more scarier than World War II, because like it was more massive artillery, numbers of artillery, but also more like territory, more people. Now, that waiting for you from everywhere. Landmines. Russia use millions of this personal. It's forbidden. Ukraine doesn't use these landmines that will blow your leg up to knee. Russia use millions. I saw it in Zaporizhia. No, literally, just every fucking meat is everywhere. They just like throw it everywhere. Unbelievable. So dead waiting for you from underground, from left, from right, from everywhere. Friendly fire from behind and from the sky. Drones, it's most awful thing I saw, and my most terrifying personal story was about FPV drones. It was almost hitting me and my body and just blow up 4 meters above our heads. Just like, I was done. I was just standing there. He was like, and just explode 4 meters before it reached our heads. not pleasant experience at all.
You were in a hole?
Yeah, we was sitting in a hole, but there was no way to escape. Like, just it came for a second. I didn't hear it coming. It come from our side, so it's make a circle. Came from our like side, so you can't hide from it. It's just terrifying. You just awful.
But did you have a drone jammer at that time, and do you have it now?
Drone jammers, you understand that it's physics. The drone can work on separate. You need to have like in a unit to protect your. First of all, we are not driving in cars. We're walking, and you need to have a separate man with a whole bag of jammers to protect like all working frequencies. Like one jammer is just like, okay, I will take this pill, I have some disease, I will take this pill, maybe it will help. Maybe. But the Russians are not stupid. Like, so it's very complicated. Like for real working jammer, like for an infantry group, it's look like huge bag. You need to extra guy to carry only jammers in his bag. And it's huge amount of weight, like 16 kilo on your back, only jammers. So you can feel protected. But if you are walking for 2 days, 3 days, you need to have like an extra batteries for these jammers. Kind of tough target. Anyway, about Russia. Again, let's make a step back and we'll ask, what is Russia? Because people was telling, yeah, no, for real. Because people was telling, we need to beat like a Russian war machine, like regime. But in my opinion, Russia is more than that. Russia, it's a cult. It's a real cult. Because if you will look at the faces of people who are fighting here and call themselves Russians, you wouldn't see so many Russian faces. I mean, like, there is Asian people, there is Caucasian people, there is so many different religions, and they call themselves Russians. What's going on with that? Russia, it's an idea. It's like a church. It's a cult. And they spreading around like parasites. And a lot of weak, uneducated people want to be a Russian. It's just like you feeling like you are part of some superpower. And to fight Russia, first of all, Western world, for example, need to stop romanticizing Russia. And their super cool culture. Don't stop like showing Russian books like in a movie if you want to see show that a character is educated guy, so he reading Tolstoy. Oh my God, that's fucked up, guys. Why not Japanese writers? Why not Chinese? Like any like African writers? You know, you are a very educated man if you know at least 2 African writers. To know Tolstoy name, you don't need to be educated, man. You just need to watch any of Western movies. And it's in every second movie. Like if you're talking about like Dostoevsky, oh my God. Tell me one famous writer after 1930 in Russia. They based all this myth on the end of the 19th and beginning of 20th century and make their culture great. Oh my God. Second thing, you need to stop believe them. Kara-Murza, you was telling me, Kara-Murza, he's in jail, blah, blah, blah. What the guy did first, he came out of jail, start protecting Russian Empire. He is not an enemy of Russia. He's maybe enemy of Putin because he won his job. Same with Navalny's wife, same with Navalny. You need to stop believe these assholes. All of them, except those who want Russian Empire to collapse. And there is not so many Russians who want that. Maybe one. I told you, not so many, not all. But, and second, you need to laugh at them. They hate this shit. They hate Ukrainians because Ukrainians laugh at them. Yeah. So first of all, you need to fight against a cult. You need to make everything possible so new people don't want to be Russians. Because look at the Russian army. There is even a lot of Ukrainians fighting for Russia right now, who believe they are part of some like kind of great culture. And here in Ukraine we have a problem. There is a Russian speakers who telling me, but you know, it's my native language. And I ask them, okay, your parents, which language they speak? Most of people say Ukrainian. Most, like, if they speak Russian, their parents, okay, your grandparents, which language they speak? Ukrainian, 90% of people. So how that happens? In which moment you became a Russian and Russian speaker? You are a victim of Russian cult. Because you can't, like previously in USSR, you can't have a good job if you speak Ukrainian. You're a villager. And this is how culture ruined. And another great super culture came to your place. In 10 years in Mariupol, there will be only Russians. And West, again, if Ukraine will recapture Mariupol, West will tell Ukraine, but look, there is so many Russians. Why are you so rude with them? How they get there? How they get to Donbass? How they get to Crimea? It's a cult. It's a cult. Look at the Baltic states, what they are doing now. If you speak Russians, you are Russian. We will come and we'll save your ass from Baltic states. They treating Baltics, because there is a lot of Russian speakers, how they get in the Baltic. So you need to stop a cult. You need at least not to help him spread. Not health. So many intellectual institutions in West sold to Russian for the last 30 years. It was so pleasant to receive Russian money, to bring them to conversation like we have. Okay, here we have a Ukrainian guest and here we have Russian. Do you want to talk? Do I want to talk to a man who raped my family and kill everybody? Why you put me in this position? Why West still try to put Ukrainian into conversation with maniac who kill all the family? Why? You need to stop to spread their cult of great Russia. Because by spreading them, they use it immediately to show their own citizens, look how great we are. They afraid us, they proud of our culture, they showing we're cool. Want to be part of us? It's like old Roman Empire. Old Roman Empire was empire because it was telling to people who they fight, you want to be Roman? You want to be Roman? You are Roman now. There is your sword, kill those bastards. This is what Russia doing. Just want to be Russian. Tell you are Russian. Proud to be Russian. Done. You are Russian. So fight a cult.
I think we've run out of time. I remember the time when this man asked for my passport, pointing his machine gun at me, and I looked at him and I said, "You're not a policeman." That was one of the most stupid things I've ever said. But you were, I was in the wrong. Anyway, never mind that. I think you said that beautifully. And actually, I can't think of anything else we can say in terms of stopping Russia. And Maria is looking at me and saying, you've got to finish. Yes? Yes, it's your fault. So, it's a wonderful panel. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to close it because we should have closed 10 minutes ago. This is a wonderful panel. I want to thank everybody here, Kellen Robinson, Ludmilla Mr. Paul Nyland, Paul, his name is Gunnar Conroy, Alpha Snell, the great Vlad Demchenko, so long as he's not arresting innocent British journalists, Dima, and of course, Lisa Kozlenko. I got it right. There we go. And Peanut. Thank you very much. Donate to the crowdfunder. Woo, woo, woo. Yeah. Oh, by the way, anyway, we'll say come back tomorrow, all that. Thank you, everybody. That was great. Did you talk in that one?
I did, yes.